In the year 2000, a struggling startup walked into Blockbuster's headquarters and offered to sell itself for $50 million. Blockbuster laughed. That startup was Netflix. Pause for a second. Imagine sitting in that room, watching that pitch, and saying no. Because that decision would go on to destroy a $6 billion empire. But this isn't just a story about arrogance. Because what really killed Blockbuster wasn't Netflix. It was something far more dangerous. A business model that looked perfect on the surface, but was rotting from the inside. And by the time they realized it, it was already too late. And here's the twist. Blockbuster actually had multiple chances to fix this. Not one. Multiple. We'll uncover each of them. To understand how Blockbuster collapsed, you need to understand just how dominant they were. In the late 90s, Blockbuster wasn't just a company. It was the way the world watched movies. Founded in 1985, Blockbuster scaled fast. Clean stores, massive inventory, predictable layouts. They turned renting movies into a standardized retail experience. This sounds basic today, but at the time, it was revolutionary. Consistency was rare. Blockbuster made it reliable. At their peak, they had over 9,000 stores worldwide, 60,000 employees, and millions of customers walking in every single day. Friday night? That belonged to Blockbuster. Families, couples, teenagers. It wasn't just a transaction. It was a ritual. But rituals can blind you, because what feels permanent often isn't. And Blockbuster was about to learn that the hard way. They weren't competing. They were the industry. But dominance hides weakness. And the cracks were already forming. Blockbuster's success wasn't luck. It was strategy. They leveraged three powerful advantages. Convenience. Before Blockbuster, renting movies was chaotic. Small stores, limited selection, poor organization. Blockbuster changed that. They made it easy to find what you wanted. Because of their size, they could buy thousands of copies of new releases. That meant one thing: availability. If a movie was popular, Blockbuster had it. But here's where it gets dangerous. When availability becomes your strength, you start assuming it always will be. Most important, late fees. This is where things get interesting. Late fees weren't just a penalty. They were a core revenue engine. At one point, late fees made up nearly 16% of Blockbuster's total revenue. That's hundreds of millions of dollars. Think about that. Their business wasn't just renting movies. It was monetizing inconvenience. And this single decision would later trap them completely. But at the time, it looked brilliant. And that's what makes it dangerous. Because bad strategies rarely look bad at the beginning. And that worked until it didn't. Because while Blockbuster was optimizing retail, a completely different model was quietly emerging. In 1997, two entrepreneurs, Hastings and Marc Randolph, launched a company with a radical idea. No stores, no late fees, movies delivered by mail. At first, it sounded ridiculous. Why would anyone wait days for a DVD when they could drive to a store? This is important. Every disruptive idea looks worse before it looks better. Even Blockbuster thought so. But Netflix wasn't playing the same game. They weren't optimizing convenience. They were eliminating friction. Then came the breakthrough. Subscriptions. For a flat monthly fee, customers could rent unlimited DVDs. No deadlines. No penalties. No stress. This wasn't just a new service. It was a new behavior. And behavior is what reshapes industries. Engagement loop. Once customers experience freedom from penalties, they don't go back. Ever. Now here's where the story shifts. In 2000, Netflix was struggling. Burning cash. Low adoption. So they did something bold. They approached Blockbuster with an offer. Buy us for $50 million. Blockbuster declined. Not because they couldn't afford it, but because they didn't see the threat. Or more accurately, they saw it and dismissed it. And that miscalculation would cost them everything. At this point, you might think the story is simple. Big company ignores small disruptor and loses. But that's too shallow. Because Blockbuster didn't fail from ignorance. They failed from incentives. Remember late fees? That revenue stream created a trap. Netflix's model, no late fees, was attractive to customers. But for Blockbuster, it was dangerous. If they removed late fees, they'd instantly lose hundreds of millions in revenue. So they hesitated. And hesitation, in a shifting market, is fatal. Here's the uncomfortable truth. They knew what to do. They just couldn't afford to do it. Meanwhile, Netflix kept evolving. They invested heavily in logistics, built recommendation algorithms, personalized the experience, and most importantly, they studied behavior. What people watched, when they watched, what they returned. Data became their weapon. Blockbuster had customers. Netflix had insight, and insight scales faster than stores. Blockbuster, on the other hand, stayed retail first. Stores, shelves, physical traffic. Even when they launched their own DVD by mail service, it conflicted with their core business. Store managers hated it. Why? Because it reduced foot traffic. And less traffic meant fewer impulse rentals and less late fee revenue. Internal conflict started eating the company from within. This is classic Clayton Christensen. Disruption doesn't destroy companies because they're stupid. It destroys them because they're optimized for the past. And Blockbuster was deeply optimized. Too optimized. Then came the real blow. Streaming. Around 2007, Netflix made another pivot. From DVDs to digital streaming. No shipping. No waiting. Instant access. This is the moment everything changed. Not gradually. Instantly. This wasn't evolution. This was a complete shift in the game. And Blockbuster wasn't ready. They tried to respond. Launched online services. Removed late fees. Too late. Closed stores. Cut costs. But every move they made was reactive. Never leading. Always catching up. But the damage was already done. In 2010, Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy. From 9,000 stores to almost none. A giant. Erased. Meanwhile, Netflix scaled into a global powerhouse. What Blockbuster dismissed for $50 million became a company worth hundreds of billions. But here's the deeper truth. Netflix didn't just win. Blockbuster designed its own failure. This story isn't about a missed acquisition. It's about strategic blindness. Blockbuster had the resources, the brand, the customers, the distribution. They could have dominated streaming, but they couldn't let go of what made them successful. And that's the paradox. What builds a company can also destroy it. Let that sink in. Your biggest strength can become your biggest liability. Michael Porter talks about trade-offs. You can't be everything at once. Blockbuster tried to protect the past while stepping into the future. And that tension broke them. Netflix did the opposite. They were willing to cannibalize themselves. From DVDs to streaming to content creation. They didn't defend their model. They replaced it over and over again. And this is the real question. Would you destroy your current success to build your future? Because if you don't, someone else will. But here's the part most people miss. Blockbuster actually had a chance to win. A real one. And it came down to a single decision that almost no one talks about. Because at one point, Blockbuster launched a service that directly challenged Netflix and started gaining traction. So what went wrong? Why did they still lose? We'll get to that. Blockbuster's biggest mistake wasn't rejecting Netflix. It was underestimating behavior change. Because once customers experience something easier, they don't go back. Ever. And the most dangerous part? The executives knew something was changing, but they couldn't act fast enough without destroying their current profits. That's the innovator's dilemma in real time. Blockbuster didn't die because Netflix was smarter. They died because they were trapped. Trapped by their own success, by their revenue model, by their incentives. And by the time they tried to escape, it was already too late. This isn't history. This is a warning. So the question is, what part of your strategy looks profitable today, but is quietly setting you up for failure tomorrow? Because somewhere right now, a smaller, faster company is building the future you're ignoring. And they're not asking for permission. If you want to understand how companies survive disruption and how others collapse under it, watch the next video. Because the pattern repeats. Every time.